Well, Linda, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm glad I'm not my son today because he's off somewhere, supposed to be in Boston by now, somewhere between here and Chicago.
You know, it's 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 been fun.
It has been. It has been. We were talking before we came on about some of the craziness that's going on in the world, just with computer outages and stuff that affected the airlines, and by the time this comes up, we're going to be right in the middle of back to school.
Yeah, and I have to admit I do not miss those years. And I only had one.
And I didn't either. And then when my uh, sister-in-law and nieces came 2 years ago, um, I had to get my youngest niece into school. And, of course, they did all the shopping. And she's a teenager, so she wears the
Yeah.
same thing every day, right? That was her deal. Um, uh, let me rephrase that. Not the same clothes, but basically she had one style pair of shorts and one style shirt, and they all looked at. So anyway, and so um but the going out, and fortunately when she started in the middle of the year, so back to school shopping was not a big deal. But this year she started high school, and
Oh
so
my.
with being still on the Uniting for Ukraine program, parolees, uh, we had to jump through all the hoops again because she went from middle school to high school. And then you have to do does she live in the district? Does she, and all this kind of stuff. And the paperwork is twice as much. Plus, now we're getting Vanya, my grandson, registered. Basically, it is the same school, but he'll be a
Yeah.
senior. But we don't have all the paperwork yet. And so it's crazy, and it gets crazy, and we have a tendency to really get out of balance when it comes to our time.
Oh, it's insanity. And depending on the grade and like if they're doing sports and stuff, there's the physicals and there's the and you
Hmm.
get those dental checkups. You gotta go in and do the you know when we were growing up, we went to Catholic school, so then we had to go buy the uniforms. And they say that that makes it easier.
Yes,
Not really,
I
because
didn't think so.
they're they're usually uglier than there is not a child I know that likes their school
No,
uniform.
no,
And you ordered them, and then sometimes when they came in, you outgrew them already.
right,
So
right.
then you had to get them again. And, we had the hand me downs, although I was the oldest. So my sister got the hand me downs, and my younger brother got the hand me downs from my mother. But there was all of that. And then the books. And when I thought we had a lot of books when I was in school. When I look at and then I thought my son had a lot of it. When I look at the kids today, I'm like, they're 7 years old and their backpacks are stuffed to the hilt. I'm like, my goodness, what are they doing?
Yeah, yeah. It looks like they're moving out.
And and I think the books are still outrageously expensive, right?
Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah.
don't. What I don't understand is why they're not all on tablets. Why, um, I know uh, here in Florida during the pandemic, when the schools were closed for that period of time, they had a whole bunch of laptops and tablets and stuff like that the kids took home, and they did their work from home on those. And so all the books were there because they
Right.
didn't want to do the book thing. And you know how all the fear was around everything with the pandemic. and
Yeah.
and why isn't that the case now? You know what I mean? Instead of spending, because they can update the books, all they have to do is go in and change it online. But yeah, I look at these kids. We have an elementary school and a middle school. I mean, if you can throw a baseball pretty decently, you could hit one of them, right?
Yeah.
And so we get both of them. And you look at the little ones, the first, second, third graders, and you're like, are you running away from home, or are you?
All the kids are gonna grow up with a permanent stoop.
Yeah. Yeah.
from carrying their backpacks. And then you see some of them that just carry it, and I'm bad. I just carry it on the one side.
Yes.
And, and then pretty soon,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
but the backpacks must weigh more than the kids do.
Yeah, I
The
know some of
little,
them. But maybe that's why they wear them to anchor them down. I don't know. But they're
so they
not in
don't go.
Wyoming or in the mountains in Colorado, so the wind doesn't blow that bad down here. And when it does, there's no school.
I was gonna say, if it's a hurricane, there's no
Well, and
school.
not even a hurricane. Linda, you know what the winds are like. Up in your area and up in
Oh, up
Wyoming.
in our area, yeah.
If it blows like that here, they close school. I'm like, we were used to, a couple snow days, and so basically they have tropical storm and hurricane days here in Florida. But I got off the point there a little bit. But this can be a really crazy time for parents and really crazy time for grandparents, those who are raising school age children, getting ready for school. And what do you think some of the things that parents can do to help manage the tasks around starting school? Because we know we can't manage time. We have 24 hours in a day. That's all we have. And,
You just got to manage what you're doing with it. And
right.
I think probably the hardest thing, obviously you want to start it a good 2 weeks, the 3 weeks before school starts,
Yep.
is getting everybody into more of a schedule. Now, not necessarily, maybe for 2 weeks you don't make them wake up at the same time as they would, but get them down so that they can get up, get cleaned up, get dressed,
Yep.
eat their breakfast, brush their teeth in a certain amount of time,
Yeah.
so that when school starts, you may be getting them up a little bit earlier, but they've got that part of the routine down so you can get them out the door.
Right. And that rest is so important.
Yeah, it's important for the kids, it's important for the parents. Everybody needs to have good rest so that they're not arguing and fighting and all of that
Right.
stuff in the morning. And my mom was very specific with us, and the shoes were by the front door, the coats, everything was like, as we walked out the door, we just grabbed everything and went. We had the coat
Right.
rack right by the door, the boots right by the door. And my mom was like, because we did Catholic school, so it wasn't like we were just down the block.
Yeah.
If you forgot something, too bad, so sad.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And if you forgot your coat and it was cold out, mom would call the school and say, it's 20 degrees out and Linda's coat's sitting here. Maybe she shouldn't go out at recess today. And sometimes they'd listen and sometimes they wouldn't. But, at that age, I'm amazed at the number of kids running around in the freezing cold in T-shirts.
Oh, yeah.
And they carry their coats like, I don't want to wear this.
Yeah. I know.
And the kids in their shorts, they got all the heavy gear on and then they're in shorts.
Yep. My grandson,
I'm like,
and he still lives in Cheyenne. It's just like, Brandon, it's cold outside. I know. You got shorts and flip-flops on, but he's got the hoodie and he's got everything else. Oh no, it's good this way. Okay.
Their legs and feet don't get cold. Mine always get cold.
Yeah. So you're really right about that one thing, the schedule, the time, because we have a tendency as parents, grandparents, we let the timing go once school gets out. I mean, we really do. Yeah. Kids start staying up later and things like that. And I know that with us, when I was raising my kids and my kids with theirs, they whatever school bedtime was, about 2 weeks before school started, they started getting the kids into, and I started getting the kids into a routine. So if bedtime was 9 o'clock, then about 2 weeks before school started, that's when they started going to bed. Of course, they've been staying up till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night or up all night or whatever, all through the summer. So the first few days, it's really a whining process.
Yeah.
But that's one thing, to begin to manage the tasks, because like you said, if we don't set them up for success with their sleep, then when morning comes, it's helter skelter. It's
Right.
They don't get breakfast, or they grab piece of toast or a Pop Tart or something out that's not healthy. And I shouldn't have even mentioned that, I guess. But on the way out the door, and
But I grew up on those. I loved those. Those
yeah,
were,
I know. There's a
I
movie out about those,
yeah.
right? So
Once I got into high school, I ate on the bus
yeah, yeah,
because it came so early because I was so far away.
yeah, yeah. My cousin did a lot of that too. I remember thinking about that when we were back this last time, and she went to a school called St. Madeline's, and I mean, from her house now, it's a good, healthy walk. But as a first, second grader, that would have
Yeah.
been just a little bit too far, right?
Yeah, and
So
nobody
yeah,
lets their kids do that anymore, I don't think.
no,
Not that far.
not that far, no. And so, but then you also have the back to school shopping now in Florida. One of the things that we do in Florida is we have a no tax holiday, and usually we have two of them a year. One is at the beginning of hurricane season,
Right.
so
You can
things that
keep up on
you
supplies
would
and
need, water, gas, all sorts of stuff.
um,
But then the one in August usually also includes some of the back to school supplies.
yeah.
And so to plan that, it's funny. And when we start talking about money and things like that, it comes the same time every year, right? It's
No
like,
surprises, right?
yeah, there's no surprises. It's like Thanksgiving and Christmas. They come the same time every year. Back to school comes the same time. So, I know that when when our kids were growing up, we really tried to get some of the basics. If we were going to, we didn't have a Walmart. We had a Kmart,
Yeah.
because the kids were in school in Rock Springs, Wyoming, right? And but we would try to pick stuff up throughout most of the summer, the stuff that we knew they would need. The
Yeah.
downside to it was back then, and I'm not saying what year it was, it was a long time ago, we wouldn't get the list of what they needed until the first week of school, which I think is the
Right.
silliest thing in the
Right.
world, right? But you also didn't have all the online stuff. You didn't have all that kind of stuff and things like that. And so,
Right.
so
Right.
that threw it into a tizzy. But now where things are a lot more standardized, and I don't know how much different each teacher is, but most of them now are all posted online.
Right. Right. And they have plenty of time. And then, if you've got older kids, then they can kind of,
Yep.
especially if they end up having the same teacher, they kind of have an idea of what they need. One of the things that I always thought was interesting about the back to school crush for things is people don't think about, we're talking, adjusting their schedules and getting ready for school. But if you've got teenagers old enough to work
Mhm.
and they're going to be working during school, not during the school day, but they're working during the school year. My brother worked at a really nice restaurant, and he went in after school and he was there till they closed, and it'd be 3 o'clock in the morning before he got home, and he'd have to be up at 5:30 to
Mhm.
get ready. And I still remember this. He slept like the dead. A bomb could go off in his room and he wouldn't hear it. We'd had tornadoes come by the house that he did not know were
My
there.
son.
And he would not wake up, because, 16,
Mhm.
17, 18, right? They're
Yep.
growing, that's what they do is they sleep it.
Yep.
And he started with one alarm clock. Mom got him up to three, and
Oh
that,
my.
in different parts of the room where he was supposed to have to get up out of bed to shut it off. And what she did is she set her alarm and she went down the hall. The alarms would be going off in Mike's room. She'd open the door, she'd grab him by the foot and haul him out of bed. And sometimes she would actually start to haul him out of the room before he woke up. Now,
Wow.
my mom was 5'2" on her tiptoes, weighed about 100 pounds,
Wow.
and my brother was 6'2".
Yeah. Wow.
So, but it was like, nope, he's not missing school.
Yeah. 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 And they don't let the kids do that now. They got to. I know that in the food business, they've cut that back to where if they're under I think if they're under 18, no, maybe it's under 16. But they have to be off by 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
Well,
And
yeah, and at least the legal working age for us is still 16, but there are certain jobs where if they are under, I want to say if they're under 21, they have to have an adult there. Because years ago, he's like, you go to the Subways and you go to the
Mhm,
McDonald's and stuff, and you got the young kids working till close.
mhm.
Well, there were two teenagers working at a Subway, and as they were closing up, they got robbed and killed.
Yep, yep,
And they were like, there's a lot of money in the till at the end of the day.
yeah, yeah,
You shouldn't have 16-year-olds there
yep,
by
yep.
themselves. They shouldn't be responsible for that.
Right, right.
And I want to say that was shortly after we moved here. But the kind of things that we didn't think about back then, we think about
We
now.
think about now. Yeah, yeah,
And I know for us, we had a bedtime. That didn't mean we fell asleep.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But at
And
least you got into a habit of, okay, it's time for bed, and you could start to wind down. You know,
right.
so yes and no, I guess, because I remember for years, I was the only boy, so I had a separate bedroom, right?
Yeah.
And so, in one place we lived in, my bedroom was upstairs. You couldn't hear anything unless I was up walking around, and especially in the springtime when baseball started, and then in September and late August, September. I remember, the Phillies would be playing on the West Coast. It'd be 10 o'clock
Yep.
Eastern time. I'm sitting there underneath the blanket with a transistor radio listening
Yep.
to the game, right? And so, I mean, mom and dad figured that out pretty fast, but what are they going to do? As soon as they go back downstairs, they turn the radio back on, right? But
Right.
but at least, okay, so the bedtime was, 9 o'clock or 9:30. I can't remember what, but you know, at, at least you have to start some routines a little bit ahead of time.
Right.
Um, ma-
And start some planning.
yeah. Mhm.
Not just the routines, but hopefully mom and dad kind of have an idea of what after school is going to look like,
Right.
what sports is going to look like,
Mhm.
extracurricular activities are going to look like, and plan around that. I honestly do not understand how people manage with more than one kid and they're in all these different things,
Right.
and I've got friends that have 4 kids. They all do different things at the same time in different parts of town. Now, there's only 2 drivers in the family. So how
Yeah.
does that even work?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how some of them do it. And I don't know with our school right here beside me, they get out at, I don't know, 2-ish, 3-ish. There's, I don't know, 20 or 30 people that start lining up at noon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
And my
the car
and
line,
so
I know, so that they can be first, but it's like, how are you saving time?
you're not saving anything, and
No,
so, yeah,
you're
so it's
sitting in
kind
your car for an hour and a half to
yeah,
2 hours.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
if they
think
get out of the
that
car,
is
they get towed. So, you know, so yeah, so what, it's really key to be able to manage the tasks around going back to school, keep it from getting
yeah,
quite so crazy. The after school stuff, if you have young adults who are working after school, know what their schedule is and everything else. And at some point in time, we have to decide, okay, you're 16, you're 17 years old, you're playing football, you're playing basketball, and whatever you're doing, and you're working. Maybe think about managing your own um, rides and carpools and stuff like that.
yeah,
And start giving them some responsibility. I mean, if they're responsible enough to play sports and to have a job, then at some point in time, think about not driving them all over God's green earth, right?
right. And that was one of the things we used to do when we were growing up is, carpools. I honestly don't know if families carpool anymore because there's so much to be done afterwards.
Yeah.
But that was a big thing for us. all the neighbors, it was, maybe, Monday's Helen,
Yep.
Tuesday is Judy, whatever. And a lot of times it was my dad that drove us because he'd drive us on his way to work.
Yeah.
We,
A
we, were
lot of
on
times,
we were on the way to his insurance office, so he would do
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Community sometimes is what's
Yeah.
broke down in when it comes to the back to school stuff, because you have they might all live on you have a dozen people who live within, walking distance of each other, and but they don't know each other because they never made the,
Right, they never made that connection. Yeah.
screen doors. This is something that growing up in Pennsylvania, every house had a screen door,
Hmm.
right? And the front door was always open
Yeah.
because the screen door was there. And so, I remember countless times where the neighbors came and knocked on the door to talk to mom or talk to dad or whatever. We knew everybody. We knew everybody on the block. And so we knew people that, and I'm just as guilty here now. I know neighbors on one side, neighbors on the other side just moved out, so we'll get some new ones. But you go 3 doors down, I don't know them.
Like I know the immediate neighbors.
Yep.
Everybody else I recognize enough to wave to.
Yep.
And the funny thing is like when we were growing up, only visitors that didn't know us came to our front door. We came through the garage. All of our
Oh, okay.
friends,
Yeah.
because the garage door was open all the time. That was
Yep.
the way we
Yep.
came in and out. The friends come, they would knock, walk in. Some of our friends didn't even
Yep.
knock, they just walked in.
Yeah.
That was so if the front doorbell rang, it meant it was somebody who didn't know us.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And
I just remember, I can think of one kid lived down the street from me who he's since passed, but um, uh, he'd be in the door, Mrs. McEwen, anybody home? Call my mom, and
yeah,
usually a lot of times I was home. I was the oldest, and because mom worked for a doctor's office. She was a nurse, and so but yeah, our house was always the meeting place.
yeah.
So
And now I worry that people don't know their neighbors well enough to understand if something's going wrong. Like
yes.
like if you don't see somebody, our neighbors across the street, we're real good with them.
Hmm.
We keep each other up to date when we're going to be out of town. Can you watch this?
Right.
Can you watch that?
Right.
And talking about trying to be better managing our tasks, I think we're
Yeah. Yeah.
we're going a little long, but that's okay.
We are. We are.
We
So
can
is it?
we can take this over on another one.
Yes, we can. So, folks, it's been a pleasure to be with you today. It's going to get crazy, but always step back, take a breath. You know.
Because it's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah,
School's going to start whether you're ready or not. So just
that's right.
take a deep breath, and everything will come together. The world will not die if your child did not bring their box of Kleenex to school on the first day.
That's right. That's right. Linda, it's been a pleasure today. I love talking especially when we can talk about, some past life experiences that we can still laugh about.
Of course. Yeah, I don't have to worry about that anymore, so I can laugh up a storm.
Yeah, there we go. All right, Linda, this has been fun today. Folks, live intentionally, be very blessed. We'll see you next week.
All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.